Hey, what's up guys? Today I'd like to talk about whetstone grits and why there's a few things you might have overlooked. For starters, if you're in the position that you're picking out your very first whetstone or you're looking to get into freehand sharpening, you're probably boggled by all the different types and grits of stones out there. But we're going to just focus on grit today. Stones generally run anywhere from around the 200 grit rating up until the tens of thousands. You can get way up there for extreme circumstances, but there is a focused set of grits we want to talk about. So sharpening grits works similar to the concept. I find it's very easy to tie it into handsaw sharpening and teeth per inch. So here would be an example. Here are grit particles. Stones are generally like composite structures of all individual pieces of grit. So a 220 grit stone would have very large pieces of grit, and that's why you feel that surface and it scratches at your skin. It's really coarse. And then we go into a 400 grit stone, and imagine a whole bunch of these rocks in very close succession. This is on a microscopic level now we're talking about. You're going to start to get a smoother surface and more finer scratches. Move up into the 1000 grit range. Okay, and you can see how we progress here. 3,000, anywhere from 2 to 4,000 grit generally. You're starting to get more fine, and then 5,000 plus, you're getting really fine scratches to the point where if you go up, I mean, some people are sharpening with stones up in the tens of thousands, and you can't feel any texture on their stones. They're essentially almost as smooth as glass. And just to offer a little better visual for how this all works, if you were sharpening with a 200 grit stone and you could look at your edge on a microscopic level, it might look something like this. And unless you did an insanely good job, you're not going to be shaving any hairs with this because the teeth are just too big that's left on that apex, and it's just too coarse. Also, if you're trying to cut anything like meat or fish or anything like that, these teeth are going to tear and rip at the flesh. It's just not going to be pleasant. Moving up to 400, we're getting a little bit finer teeth and finer and so on until you get up to, say, a 1000. I'd say if you could compare a 220 and a 1000, this is about the comparison here, these teeth and this here. So these teeth are starting to get really small. And then you move up even further to say something like this, a hacksaw, and your teeth get more and more fine. Again, on a microscopic level, you wouldn't be able to see these teeth, but this is just a little representation to help you get the idea in your mind. So the finer the tooth, the smoother the cut is going to be. Now, what grits do you need? Well, here's how it works. The bigger the grit, or the lower the number, the faster you're going to remove material. So if you've got something carving at your steel this size, in contrast to the others, it's going to remove steel a lot quicker. You can shovel a lot faster with a big square head shovel than you can with a little hand trowel. So this will make your steel removal a lot faster. So if you're working with knives or tools that are really rough, you use your tools hard and you get lots of dents and chips, you're going to want something down in this range. Now, how far do you go up here? Well, that depends. We'll talk about later what's more important. If you're working, say, if you're using straight razors, you need to go way beyond this particle here just to get an edge that's smooth on your skin, that doesn't pull. You really rely on that razor sharp edge. And with straight razors, because the use is so delicate, you very rarely get down in, say, this range. A lot of times you'll start, if you have a dull razor, you'll start at 1000 and work out. A lot of times you won't even need to go back down that low. You can start here somewhere and work up from there. And it might seem like more polish equals more sharp, but it's not exactly that simple. There are some trade-offs there, things you're giving up and things you're adding on that I want to talk about. For example, getting into the standard, just general use hunting knife, your small game or big game skinning knife, something like this, lots of you have seen before. So what type of edge do you want on this knife? If you're doing work with it like skinning and meat processing, is it necessary to have, say, an 8000 grit edge? I think absolutely not, and I think that might actually be a bit of a hindrance. First of all, I think when you're dealing with big game meat, a slightly coarser edge is actually a little better. So between 1,000 and 2,000 grit, or even lower than that. And if you can get, if you've got a mop wheel, say on a grinder, and you can do a polish, a coarser edge with that little bit of tooth like we talked about might be a better option. It might hold up a little better, and it might grip that material a little better, and it'll tear through. Also, if you think about in the field, unless you have multiple knives, sometimes you might have to sharpen a knife multiple times throughout a sharpening. Are you going to have all your extreme grit whetstones there all the way up to, say, 8,000 grit? Probably not. So what you're going to have is probably a pocket stone, a field stone, or something quick. And if you have that beautiful 8,000 grit edge, you're going to use it for a little bit. Once it gets dull, you're going to resort back to that lower grit. So it might be just as easy to start off with a lower grit out of your shop and keep it around there. It's a more serviceable grit. It takes a lot less time to get it back in shape. It just might be the better option for you. Kitchen knives like this little Henkel's here, a similar idea. Do you need a super polished, incredibly shaving sharp edge on this knife? Not necessarily. There are certain materials, say if you're doing a lot of work with fish, then you probably want a polished edge. Fish is a very delicate material, so you want a smooth knife. You don't want any grit or any bite to that edge that'll pull and tear at the flesh. Whereas a extremely sharp polished edge will glide through material a little better. But for general purpose, chopping, dicing, slicing, cutting onions, or turnip, carrots, whatever, you do not need that super mirror polished edge. It's probably going to be the better option for you to have something like this, like we talked about, like a 400 and a 1,000 grit combo stone. Just a one stone kept in your kitchen for doing touch-ups on your kitchen knife. Top it out at 1,000. You could have a strap there if you want, but it's not necessary. And leave this at 1,000 grit, and it is going to be sharp for most kitchen tasks. Plenty sharp. Now, with all that information said, what do you do with that? What stones do you buy? Well, it comes back to what we were saying about what your needs are. If you're starting out to just get a decent stone, combo stones are your friend. You get a lot more for your money. You get twice the stone. Of course, you get 2 different stones for around the price you'd pay for 1 stone. So these are some good examples here. These are sharp pebble stones, and they offer 2 stones, combination stones, that will take you pretty much through the entire range, right from 400 up to 8,000. Sorry, if you have something, if you're needing really heavy work done, you might want to consider going a little lower than 400. Let's say if you're constantly leaving your blade full of dents and chips, you might want to pick up a cheap hardware store tool stone with some real heavy grit just to help you out. But this 400, of course, it'll still remove the steel. It'll just take a little bit longer than, say, the 220. Now, up around an 8,000 grit stone, again, maybe you need a stone for straight razors, so you might want to go even further. Strops and polishing compound are also something worth mentioning. A compound like this has an actual grit in the paste that's generally finer than, so this would be a finer than my 8,000 grit stone. And with a coarse leather, or rough side leather, you can just kind of rub the paste into the leather, and then once you strap your knife on that, it brings your edge up even a little better than you had with a stone. So it can get you a little further without spending very much more money. That is it for this video. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button and share. I'd love for you to share my video. Leave me a comment down below. Tell me where you are in your sharpening journey. I'd like to hear that too. I know some of you guys have more knowledge learned over your years sharpening. You've forgotten more knowledge than I've learned, but I hope everyone enjoyed nevertheless. If you're brand new to the skill or the hobby of whetstone sharpening, I hope you enjoy it. There's a lot of information to take in out there, but it's such a great hobby. Get yourself a couple good starter stones. Think about what I said about what your needs are. Buy a couple decent stones and start from there.